Tonight, you're not a soldier or a diplomat. You're not a merchant prince or an adventurer with a map and a destiny. You're just another drifter with too much curiosity, not enough common sense, and a very unfortunate taste for escape. You've come to Colonial Shanghai, a city carved up like a roast duck by foreign powers and greed, where the air is thick with steamships, whispers, and the slow, sweet smoke of your undoing. You don't know it yet, but your lungs are going to fill with more opium than oxygen, and you'll spend the rest of your short life chasing a feeling that never quite comes back. So before the floor gets sticky and your heartbeat starts sounding like a funeral drum, leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love hearing from fellow insomniacs drifting through the haze. And if you'd like early access to more long, slow collapses into historical dysfunction, plus perks like ad-free audio of these episodes, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Now lie back, breathe in, and don't ask what's in the pipe. You don't really want to know. You arrive in Shanghai with more optimism than sense and just enough coin in your pocket to get yourself into trouble. The year is something like 1875, give or take a revolution. History is a bit blurry here. The calendars don't match, the clocks don't agree, and the city runs on its own kind of time, measured not in minutes, but in money, favours, and the number of times you've been lied to today. You step off the boat with stiff legs and high hopes, squinting into a haze that might be mist or smoke, or opium fumes leaking from the walls. You tell yourself this is the start of something, a new chapter, a bold venture, but Shanghai doesn't care what you told yourself. Shanghai already has plans for you. The docks are chaos, coolies shout over one another while hauling crates full of silk, tea, and things better left unlabelled. Foreign men in top hats bark orders in English, French, or angry approximations of Mandarin. Local children dart between carriages, selling sweets or watching tourists with the kind of old eyes that suggest they've seen more brutality than you'll manage in a lifetime. The streets smell like coal smoke, sweat, perfume, and river rot, a bouquet of desperation with just a hint of profit. Somewhere nearby, a cannon from a British gunboat reminds the city who's in charge. You flinch, no one else does. You're new. It shows. You find a place to stay in the international settlement, a part of the city technically under British jurisdiction, though the only real law here is leverage. The buildings are squat, brick-faced things with iron railings and peeling paint, trying very hard to look like something from London, but failing spectacularly in the humidity. The landlords have names like Smythe and Holbrook, and pretend not to notice the cockroaches skittering across their ledgers. You pay too much for a room that smells like damp wallpaper and dying dreams, and try to convince yourself it's temporary, that you'll move up, that you're just passing through. Outside your boarding house, the streets are alive in the way a festering wound is alive. Rickshaws bump past sedan chairs, and opium carts rattle by like mobile funerals. You hear a woman screaming in Shanghainese from a second-story window, something about debt or betrayal, or maybe just dinner. Below her, a European banker steps over a beggar like he's avoiding a puddle. You pass a shop selling powdered rhino horn and porcelain teacups next to a British pub called the Imperial Lion that smells like old meat and bad decisions. This isn't the East you read about in books. This isn't silk robes and sage wisdom. This is empire with its boots off scratching itself. You're not quite sure what brought you here. Trade, maybe, or boredom, or the seductive idea that you could escape whatever version of yourself you left behind in Liverpool or Boston or Sydney. You told people you were going to make your fortune. You told yourself you were different. But Shanghai is a city built to devour optimism. It doesn't matter why you came. What matters is that you've already started to disappear. The city is divided, though no one agrees exactly how. There are boundaries here, Official ones marked on maps and unofficial ones marked by poverty, skin colour, and how badly you want to keep your teeth. The British have their enclave, complete with soldiers, courts, and afternoon tea. The French have theirs, where everyone drinks wine and pretends they're not also here for the money. The Americans loiter somewhere in between, trying to sell guns and Bibles. The Chinese live everywhere else, which is to say, in the parts of Shanghai that actually feel like Shanghai, rather than a parody of a European postcard. These areas are loud, crowded, frantic. They smell like garlic, incense, and unwashed feet. You prefer them, not that it makes a difference. At night, the gas lamps flicker like they're afraid of the dark. You walk streets where the buildings lean in toward one another like conspirators, where shadows cling to the brick like mould, and where the soft, low hum of opium dens leaks through shuttered windows. You pass a man vomiting into a gutter, a child curled up under a stairwell, and a woman with no shoes offering something you don't want to understand. The city pulses around you, alive and rotting, like a corpse that hasn't realised it's dead yet. And all the while, there's the smoke. Thick, tarry, bittersweet. It curls from alleyways and dens, from open doorways and private parlours. You smell it before you ever see the pipe. It slips into your nose, coats your throat, turns the edges of your thoughts soft. You think of it as background at first, just another part of the city's strange perfume. But the smell will stay with you, cling to your clothes, sink into your skin. You don't know it yet, but it's already calling you. You're not special. You're not destined. You're not the first naive foreigner to step into Shanghai thinking it would hand you something valuable in return for your ambition. This city doesn't hand things out. It sells them to you in pieces, and by the time you realise the cost, it's already taken the parts of you that mattered. You came here looking for a new life. What you'll get is a very slow death, wrapped in velvet smoke and colonial lies. Welcome to Shanghai. Try not to breathe too deeply. It isn't a city in the traditional sense. It's a machine, a colonial organism kept alive by greed, contradiction, and a heavy dose of denial. It doesn't grow, it metastasizes. Foreign powers carved it into quarters like a stolen pie, each claiming their slice in the name of progress, civilization, or commerce. Whichever lie sounded best that week. You don't notice it right away, but the boundaries are everywhere. British gas lamps give way to French sycamores, which give way again to Chinese rooftops, pressed together like folding fans. Each district runs on its own rules, currency and logic, none of which you fully understand. You move between them like a ghost, too foreign for one, too foreign for the other, and too naive to realise it doesn't matter. No one's asking where you belong. The British settlement is the most obvious example of imported arrogance. Brick buildings with columns, names like Empire House and Victoria Exchange, and a faint but persistent scent of imported soap. It's orderly in the way only colonised places pretend to be, law-abiding for those who write the laws, and lawless for those who must obey them. The French concession is more stylish and chaotic, where the wine flows faster than paperwork, and everyone is either having an affair or pretending they're not. The Americans haven't built much yet, but they're making up for it with flags, rifles, and an enthusiasm for moral superiority. Meanwhile, the Chinese city hums just beyond the mapped borders, vast, cramped, unwelcome to foreign boots, and full of people who remember what Shanghai was before it was sold. What ties these districts together isn't governance or language or anything resembling shared humanity. It's trade, and by trade you increasingly mean opium. Not officially, of course. The official word is commerce, but commerce here has a very specific smell, thick, sticky, faintly sweet, and a very specific form. Tar-packed bricks, wrapped in oil paper, stamped with characters, and shipped in crates marked tea or spices, or not at all. If you want to know what really runs Shanghai, you follow the craters. They pass through customs without being opened. They move from go down to counting house to pipe faster than any law can keep up. The money flows upward. Indian-grown poppies sold by British firms, taxed by Chinese officials, smoked by the poor, and funded by the slow death of everyone involved. You can see the effects if you know where to look. Not just in the bodies curled beneath awnings, but in the houses built on those bodies. Wealth here doesn't build upward. It insulates outward. Thicker walls, wider verandas, imported pianos. Men speak of the trade like it's a tide they merely float on, not something they profit from. They insist that the opium problem is a moral failing, but only of those too weak to moderate. You learn quickly that nothing says respectability like profiting from someone else's collapse while pretending you're shocked by it. Within this system, you're mostly irrelevant. You don't have enough capital to exploit anyone, and not enough local knowledge to protect yourself. You're a bystander at best, a target at worst. Everyone here is watching everyone else, not out of curiosity, but calculation. Where you eat, who you associate with, how much silver you carry, it all signals something. And once the wrong people know you're expendable, they treat you accordingly. Invitations stop coming. Prices go up. The den doors stay open a little longer when you pass by, just in case today's the day. You begin to notice things you didn't before. The Chinese sections of the city are overcrowded, not just because of population, but policy. Restrictions on land ownership, limited sanitation, policing that looks more like extortion. Meanwhile, the foreign districts hold garden parties and pass resolutions about civic hygiene. It's not even subtle. The whole city is built like a hierarchy etched into brick and bone. The whiter your skin, the higher you're allowed to climb. But you're not at the top. You're just a lower tier outsider. Decorative, perhaps. Disposable, certainly. And still, for all its division, Shanghai feels unified in one respect. It moves at a speed that doesn't wait for the dying. The sick are stepped over. The broke are evicted. The dead are cleared before lunch. A man can be smoking one moment and dragged out by his heels the next, and no one even blinks. This is a city designed to absorb pain without flinching. Because behind every collapsed figure is a replacement, another arrival, another optimist, another future addict who doesn't yet know how this place works. You hear the word before you see the pipe. Yapian, opium. It slips between conversations like a rumour too old to question. You hear it from traders, dock workers, missionaries pretending not to notice what their parishioners are smoking behind the church. It's in the background of every transaction, whether you're buying silk or just a seat on the tram. Even people who don't touch the stuff talk about it, mostly with contempt, sometimes with longing, always with the weary tone of someone who knows it isn't going anywhere. The drug isn't hidden. It's not whispered like a sin. It's more like weather, ever present, sometimes heavier than others, but always in the air. Some places serve it with tea. Some tuck it into paper packets, as casually as sugar. Some wrap it in respectability, with nice furniture and imported wallpaper, and men who wear waistcoats, while slowly erasing themselves. There are dens that cater to the poor, dark and damp, where the floor sticks to your shoes. And then there are the elegant ones, where French curtains filter the afternoon sun, and the ashtrays are sterling silver. No matter your class, there's always a pipe within reach. Opium doesn't discriminate, it just waits. You start to understand that this isn't just a vice or a trend. This is infrastructure. This is how the city functions. It's taxed, tracked, and shipped with more care than most people. The British East India Company perfected the system years before you arrived. Grow it in India, ship it to China, sell it at a premium. Use the profits to buy Chinese tea, silk and porcelain to sell back home. Everyone wins except the Chinese. And now, except you. You're stepping into a supply chain that begins in Bengal, passes through Canton, and ends in your bloodstream. The drug built fortunes, funded colonial governments, and paid for the very roads you walk on. You'll never be rich from it, but you'll help someone else stay that way. People still talk about the wars, though, usually with the kind of historical detachment that makes you forget how recently it all happened. The first Opium War began in 1839, when the Qing government finally tried to crack down on the trade. They seized and destroyed massive shipments of British opium. Britain responded with warships, superior firepower, and the calm certainty of a nation that knew it could shoot its way into a better profit margin. China lost, badly, and when it ended, they didn't just have to pay reparations. They had to legalize the very thing they tried to ban. Shanghai became a treaty port, pried open like a clam and left raw. The Second Opium War followed a few decades later, just in case anyone thought the first one was a misunderstanding. This time, it was even uglier. Looted palaces, burned archives, treaties signed under duress. By the end of it, foreign powers had secured even more control. They could trade freely, travel inland, preach, sell, and of course, push opium with near total impunity. No one likes to say it outright, but the truth is obvious. Britain didn't just go to war over drugs. It went to war for the right to keep its customers addicted. Now the business is institutionalized. You see it in the ledgers of shipping firms, the columns of import taxes, the smug grins of colonial officials who insist they're just upholding treaties. Even the missionaries get their cut, whether they admit it or not. Some rail against the drug in sermons and then rent church-owned property to opium dealers. Others hold prayer meetings outside dens while quietly accepting donations from men with stained fingertips. The hypocrisy isn't subtle, but neither is the profit. You meet people who still try to resist it, reformers who write angry pamphlets and circulate them at great personal risk, local officials who try to enforce bans with dwindling authority, mothers who lock their sons in basements to sweat through withdrawal alone. But the tide is too strong. The trade isn't just a river, it's an ocean, and you're standing ankle deep, pretending you won't be pulled under. You wonder what makes it so irresistible. You've never touched the stuff, not yet, but you've seen the look in the eyes of those who have. Not pleasure exactly, not even peace, just a kind of absence, like someone standing at the edge of sleep. The smokers look as though they've given up asking questions, as though, for a few hours, the unbearable weight of being alive in this city becomes tolerable. Maybe that's the point. It doesn't make things better. It just makes them irrelevant. And there's something else, a strange reverence in the way people talk about it. Not like a drug, but like a ritual. The pipe, the lamp, the slow inhalation. It's all practiced, repeated, perfected. You've seen men with the shakes fumble for it, like it's the last remaining piece of themselves. You've seen women exhale like they're releasing entire decades. You're beginning to suspect that addiction isn't a side effect, it's the goal. You tell yourself you're just going to look. That's the first lie. You say it to no one in particular as you walk past the red lantern, swaying above a narrow door, and let your hand pause just a second too long on the frame. Maybe you're curious, maybe you're bored, maybe you've simply run out of other things to pretend you care about. Either way, your feet make the decision for you. You duck inside. The air thickens around you immediately, warmer, denser, laced with something sweet and terrible. You're not here to smoke, you remind yourself. You're just observing. A harmless little tour of Shanghai's most whispered vice. You repeat the lie until it tastes familiar. The den is smaller than you imagined, and darker. Curtains hang in uneven folds, dividing the room into narrow compartments. The lamps are low and yellow, casting halos that barely reach the floor. Everything seems muffled Sound, light, even movement. It smells like incense, sweat, mildew, and something richer underneath. Something almost floral. Opium. You recognize it now. You've smelled it before on the street, drifting out of doorways, clinging to the sleeves of men who passed you with dead eyes. But here, it's concentrated, saturated. It's in the fabric, in the floorboards, in the breath of the man who gestures for you to sit. You hesitate, still performing the fiction of self-control, but your legs move again without permission. The couch beneath you is stained but soft. There's a pipe already waiting, its bowl still warm, resting beside a small lamp and a shallow tray of the tar-like substance. The attendant doesn't ask if you want to smoke. He just begins preparing the dose with practiced ease, rolling the opium into a black pearl between his fingers, then toasting it gently over the flame until it glistens. You watch his hands more than the drug. They're steady, calm. You envy them. The pipe comes to your lips like it's always belonged there. That's the second lie, that this is your first time. The heat of the smoke surprises you, but not unpleasantly. It moves down your throat like velvet soaked in alcohol. There's a bitterness, sharp and earthy, but it fades quickly, replaced by something sweet and numbing. Your eyes water, your fingers twitch, and then nothing. Or rather, everything, all at once, smoothed over like polished glass. The noise in your head, the hunger, the restlessness, the ache of simply existing fades so quickly that you almost panic. You realize you've been carrying pain you didn't know had a name, and now it's gone. Your body relaxes too much and too fast. You slump against the cushion, feel the room tilt slightly, like a ship easing into calm water. Your breath slows. You hear it now, the rhythm of the den. Not voices, not really, but the soft inhale-exhale of dozens of lungs, taking in and giving up. The sound of people floating. Someone laughs softly from behind the curtain. Someone else coughs. A wet sound that doesn't stop. You try to care, but it feels distant, like news from another life. You close your eyes, you're still. It is quiet. For the first time in Shanghai, you are not afraid. Time doesn't pass so much as melt. You can't say whether you're there for minutes or hours. The lamp beside you flickers. You forget your name, then remember it again, and laugh quietly at how unimportant it feels. Your limbs are heavy and light at the same time. Your thoughts slow, unravel, reform into shapes you don't recognize. At one point, you try to stand. You don't succeed. You decide it isn't worth the effort. Eventually, the smoke thins, the high ebbs. You open your eyes and the room is no longer golden, but grey. The sweetness has turned sour in your mouth. You notice the dirt in the corner of the floor, the fly circling your ankle, the ache returning to your spine. You sit up too fast and your vision flickers. Your stomach churns with hunger and something like shame. The attendant offers you water from a chipped bowl. You drink it without thinking. You leave the den just before dusk. The street outside is louder than you remember. Too sharp, too real. The light makes you squint. You feel like a peeled fruit, raw and exposed. You tell yourself you're done. It was a one-time thing, a curiosity satisfied. A box checked off the list of colonial experiences you'll now try to forget. But already you feel the absence. A cold patch in your chest, where the warmth was. You don't miss the high exactly. You miss the silence. The next day is worse, your limbs ache, and not from exertion. Your mood shifts with the wind. Coffee doesn't help. Walking doesn't help. You try to read, to write, to distract yourself with anything that doesn't involve velvet smoke. But your thoughts return to it again and again, to the moment the pipe touched your lips, to the way your fear dissolved like sugar in tea. You don't want to go back. That's the third lie. You tell it to yourself as you count the coins in your pocket. Just to see if there's enough. You start thinking in maybes. Maybe once more. Maybe a smaller dose. Maybe it wasn't the opium. Maybe it was just being tired. Maybe you deserve a little peace. You frame it as a kindness. You dress it up in language that still lets you feel in control. But the truth is simpler, uglier, and much older than you. The hook is in. Not deep yet, not through the bone, but far enough to pull. You'll return. Of course you will. Not because you want to, because now you don't quite remember how to feel safe without it. And soon you won't remember how to feel anything at all. By the third visit, you've stopped pretending it's research. By the seventh, the smoke feels more real than daylight. You didn't mean to become a regular. It just happened. You stopped keeping track of how many times you returned, because tracking implies choice, and choice is a story you've stopped telling yourself. The den isn't a destination anymore. It's a routine, a second home, the first one being that cramped boarding room with the wallpaper that peels in long strips and the mattress that smells like forgotten hopes. But the den is different. The den is quiet, predictable. Software. It holds you without asking questions. No expectations, no consequences, just a pipe, a place to lie down, and the gentle permission to stop feeling anything at all. You know the layout now, and more importantly, you know how to move through it, how to nod at the attendants without speaking, how to step over the feet of someone half-conscious and twitching, how to keep your shoes close to your cot so no one else claims them before morning. The bunks are low and narrow, separated by ragged curtains that don't block sound but do offer the illusion of privacy. The shadows are thick, and they move strangely. Sometimes you think you see someone sitting up beside you, only to blink and realise it's a pile of blankets, or no one at all. Sometimes it's the opposite. There's a rhythm to the place, like a tide that ebbs and flows with the lungs of the room. Pipes hiss gently in the dark. Someone always coughs, a low, ragged sound that never quite stops. Once in a while someone murmurs a name, theirs maybe, or someone they lost, and then falls silent again. Most people don't speak, some never move. You've shared a bunk wall with the same man for weeks and aren't sure if he's still alive. You've stopped checking. If he is, he'll stir when the pipe reaches him. If not, someone will eventually carry him out. You no longer notice the passage of time. The den doesn't deal in hours or days. It deals in sessions, in burns of the pipe, in the slow dissolve of waking into sleep and sleep into waking. Morning means nothing. Meals are irregular and forgettable. Outside noises filter in from the street. Bells, voices, horses, but they might as well be coming from another continent. At some point someone mentions the date, and you laugh, not because it's funny, but because the word feels so ridiculous now. Dates are for people with futures. The people who run the den know you now, though they don't say so. Your pipe is always ready a little faster. Your usual bunk left unclaimed, unless someone desperate takes it first. Even then, they'll usually move when you arrive, without a word. There's a hierarchy here, unspoken but rigid. It isn't about wealth or race or age. It's about how far you've fallen. The more broken you are, the less anyone dares to cross you. Some of the most shattered people in the den are treated with quiet reverence, as if the others are afraid they'll become mirrors. You start to forget things. First, the small details, what day it is, where you put your boots, how long since you last saw the sun. Then it gets worse. You forget the name of your landlord. You forget where your coins came from. You forget what you looked like before you started spending nights here. Eventually, you stop caring. One morning, or maybe evening, you can't tell, you catch your reflection in a darkened window. You stare at it for a long time, waiting to recognize something. You don't. The outside world becomes a rumor. You hear that there was a fire in the French concession, or a riot in the Chinese city, or that another opium ship just came in loaded to the hull. You hear that someone important died, that the price of tea has changed, that there's been a crackdown somewhere, by someone. But it all sounds like theatre, distant noise. You can't even pretend to care. Your world has narrowed to the size of a cot, a pipe, and the brief space between dreams and oblivion. Some of the dreams are vivid, not pleasant necessarily, but intense. You dream of people you've never met, places you've never been. You speak languages you don't know. Sometimes you're flying, sometimes falling, sometimes simply floating through a city that looks like Shanghai but isn't. When you wake, your heart races, and for a few seconds, you think you've come back to life. Then you smell the smoke again and remember where you are. The dreams were just part of the high, and the high, like everything else, has started to dull. It takes more now. More opium to reach the same silence. More time to push the noise away. You chase the feeling but never quite catch it. What once came easily now demands effort. And when it arrives, it's thinner, ghostly, like an echo of what you used to feel. You try not to think about that. You just ask for another pearl, another burn, another hour of stillness. The den doesn't question you. It just accommodates. Occasionally, someone dies, quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. You don't witness it often. Bodies are removed quickly, through a back door or covered under a blanket until night. No one reacts, no one mourns. Death in the den is just another part of the rhythm. A silence where there used to be a cough. A space in a bunk that fills again within the hour. You wonder sometimes if someone will notice when it's your turn, whether anyone will pause, whether anyone will care. You think about leaving, you even try once. You make it as far as the street, blinking against the sunlight, your hands trembling, your stomach turning. The noise is unbearable, the face is too sharp, the movement too fast. You stand on the curb for 10 full minutes before turning back. The den welcomes you without judgment. The pipe is still warm. No one asks what happened. That's the worst part. They knew you'd come back. This is your life now. A half dream inside a half room, surrounded by people slowly vanishing, one inhale at a time. You don't know how long it's been. You don't ask. You don't need to. Because whatever you had before this, a job, a future, a name, is gone. And all that's left is the smoke, the silence, and the slow, painless collapse into something less than human. You think your addiction is personal. It isn't. It's industrial, designed, optimized. You are never the customer, just the end point of an empire's distribution chain. The pipe you hold isn't a habit, it's a tool, a method for transferring silver from China to Britain, painlessly and efficiently. At least for Britain, the poppies didn't grow in Shanghai. They were cultivated by the British in India. Entire regions in Bengal, Bihar and Malwa transformed into production zones, not for food, but for intoxication. Rice fields were replaced with rows of poppies, farmers were coerced, loans were issued, debt mounted, and suddenly a whole population was growing addiction for a different empire. The British even had branding, Patna Opium, labelled, graded, prized. The product moved with bureaucratic elegance. It was auctioned in Calcutta, shipped across the Bay of Bengal, and landed smoothly in Chinese ports like a seasonal good. No smuggling, no secrecy, just profit. The British East India Company handled the logistics. British officials ensured protection. British banks handled the money. The system was so large, so clean on paper, that even when it killed, it looked like a business success. And when China resisted, when the emperor's officials started burning the crates and blocking the ports, the British answered not with negotiation, but with gunboats. That's what the Opium Wars were. Not noble conflicts over trade rights or diplomatic slights. They were wars to keep selling drugs, wars to keep people like you hooked. And when China lost, Britain didn't just claim victory, it claimed territory. That's why Shanghai is the way it is now. A divided city with foreign flags, Foreign laws, foreign money. The Treaty of Nanking made sure of that. Whole districts were carved out as concessions, immune to Chinese authority. The opium trade moved in like it had always belonged, and no one stopped it because too many people were getting rich. You are never going to escape this because this isn't about weakness, it's about structure. The dens aren't run by accidents, they're maintained by logistics. The smoke that fills your lungs travelled thousands of miles under armed escort and signed documents. You didn't fall, you were placed. The empire doesn't care what opium does to your teeth, or your liver, or your dreams. It cares what it does to the silver market. It cares how many chests it can move in a quarter. It tracks bulk, not blood. Each user is a digit, and each death is just proof that the demand remains high. It doesn't need loyalty. It doesn't need faith. It just needs you to keep needing. And if you die, so be it. You weren't the only one smoking. You weren't even the only one dying. There's always someone else, another mouth to feed the hunger, another body to soak in the smoke. The supply chain doesn't mourn you, it replaces you. Even now, lying half-conscious in a den that smells like mould and regret, the empire is still moving. A clerk is logging a shipment, a broker is calculating tariffs, a ship is docking with crates of your undoing neatly stacked and stamped. No one sees your face, no one says your name, but your purchase still echoes, not as a cry for help, but as a revenue. You might tell yourself this is personal, that you made your own decisions, that you had a choice, and maybe you did for a little while, but the empire was always bigger than your discipline. It had better planning, better maps, better math. It waited. And when you slipped, once, just once, it caught you. You can't boycott it. You can't protest it. You can't escape it by dying. Because the machine that built this, the company ledgers, the shipping routes, the polite euphemisms about trade imbalances, has already moved on to someone else. Your body is irrelevant. Your suffering is irrelevant. The system survives precisely because it doesn't notice. So when you light the next pipe, know this. The fire is British. The poppy is Indian. The ruin is yours. And none of it was accidental. You don't notice much of the outside world at first, not because it isn't crumbling, but because you're too busy crumbling alongside it. The den cocoons you in silence and smoke, and it becomes easy to pretend nothing exists beyond the curtains. But the city hasn't stopped rotting just because you've chosen to lie down. Shanghai is festering. The streets echo with the sounds of protest, hunger, and gunmetal diplomacy. And while you ignore it for as long as you can, eventually, reality claws its way back in. Usually, around the time your last coin clinks at the bottom of your pocket. When you're forced out onto the street, usually in search of silver or something to trade for another pipe, the stench hits first. Not just sewage or sweat or the chemical bitterness of a river that forgot how to flow clean, but desperation. The city smells like people trying not to starve. Vendors shout from sagging stalls, offering boiled roots, spoiled meat, anything vaguely edible. Children beg without really expecting to be fed. Some don't even bother asking anymore. The lines for rice grow longer and the bowls get smaller. You start to understand why so many people turn to smoke. Hunger can be ignored for a while, but hopelessness is harder to starve off. The foreign soldiers are impossible to miss. They stand out like brass buttons on a rotting coat, pristine, confident, and completely out of place. British troops in red, French Marines in navy, American sailors looking bored with their rifles half-slung. They patrol the international settlement with the casual brutality of men who know they'll never face consequences. Their boots are clean, their uniforms tailored, their orders given in languages the locals understand only well enough to obey. They're not here to protect you. They're here to protect property, which means silver, buildings, contracts, and sometimes, when it's convenient, you. You see them dragging a Chinese teenager down an alley. His crime was unclear. Maybe he stole something. Maybe he looked too long in the wrong direction. Maybe they just wanted to remind everyone who was in charge. The boy doesn't scream. He knows it won't help. No one intervenes. You watch for too long before you keep walking. There was a time when you would have been outraged. But now, your emotions feel like someone else's clothing, familiar, but no longer yours. The Qing government, if it still qualifies as such, is unravelling. Its officials are either corrupt, exiled, or paralysed. The emperor rules in name only, tucked behind layers of eunuchs, advisors, and well-meaning bureaucrats who can't decide whether to modernise or pray harder. Reformists beg for change, for Western technology, for legal restructuring, for anything that might stop the bleeding. Some call for constitutional monarchy, some for revolution, some just for mercy. Most are ignored, a few are executed, and all of them are overwhelmed by the simple, brutal math of empire. You can't fix a system when someone else already owns the screws. You hear whispers of rebellion inland, uprisings, militias, villages declaring themselves free from imperial interference. But in Shanghai, the system holds, propped up by opium, tariffs, and guns. The city has been carved too carefully to fall apart quickly. The foreigners hold the leases, the armies, the shipping routes. The Chinese businessmen caught in between try to stay profitable and invisible. The missionaries still preach salvation while renting buildings to opium traders. The rot is comprehensive, political, moral, spiritual. You try not to think about it. You fail. Your silver doesn't stretch as far anymore. The attendants in the den stop warming your pipe for you. Your usual bunk is suddenly occupied by someone younger, richer, or simply more alert. You try to argue once, your voice hoarse and unconvincing. They shrug. You're no longer a priority. You've become part of the background. Another low-return addict slowly running out of worth. You trade a pair of shoes for a half dose, then a belt, then a ring you don't remember putting on. Eventually, there's nothing left but your hands and your promises. Neither carries much weight. And when you can't pay, the world shows its teeth. The civility of the colonial system, the politeness, the rules, the illusions of fairness, all vanish the moment you stop being useful. The shopkeepers who once smiled now watch you with suspicion. The guards who ignored you now shove you aside. Even the den operators, men who've seen 100 like you, start to sigh when you enter. You're a liability now, a reminder of what happens when the system runs out of uses for a person. And in Shanghai, no one likes reminders. You try to steal. Just once, a coin purse carelessly placed, you get caught, not by police but by the shopkeeper, who slaps you hard enough to make your ears ring. A soldier watches from the corner and laughs. No arrest, no punishment, just humiliation. It's more effective anyway. You stagger away, dizzy and shaking, feeling less like a person and more like something scraped off a shoe. And still, you find your way back to the den. Because even humiliation hurts less when you're high. You start seeing the city differently, not as a place, but as a trap. Every building, every official, every regulation designed to extract until there's nothing left. The law is a mask for violence. The church is a mask for property. Even charity has strings. Reformers preach hope, but they disappear without explanation. Rebels are hanged, students are beaten, workers starve while ships sail past them loaded with bricks of narcotics and crates of silver bound for London, Calcutta, Paris. You stop expecting justice, you stop expecting anything. Eventually, you learn the rule that no one writes down, but everyone understands. In Shanghai, nothing matters except what you can offer. And once you've run out of silver, labour, or favours, you are no longer a citizen of anything. You're not even a problem. You're just waste. Another casualty swept into the gutter to make room for whatever comes next. And you? You're still hoping the next pipe will make all that easier to ignore. You don't quit because you're strong. You try to quit because you have to. Maybe the money's gone. Maybe your body's too weak to get to the den. Maybe someone you vaguely remember cared about you once, said something cruel enough to make you try. Whatever the reason, the attempt doesn't start like a decision. It starts like an accident. You go a day without smoking, then 2, maybe 3. At first you pretend it's willpower, that you're choosing this, that you're reclaiming something, but your body quickly corrects you. This isn't recovery. This is collapse. It starts with sweat. Not the normal kind, but a cold, unnatural dampness that soaks your clothes and sheets and skin. You can't get warm, or rather, you're hot and freezing at the same time, shivering under blankets, then throwing them off as your body sizzles and chills in waves. Your stomach knots, your bowels empty, your hands twitch and shake. You try to lie still, but your muscles don't obey anymore. Your limbs pull inward, like a dying insect. Your skin starts to itch, not just on the surface, but from somewhere underneath. No scratch can reach it. You rub until you bleed anyway. The pain isn't sharp, it's constant, dull but total, like your bones are being squeezed from the inside. Your joints throb. Your spine screams. You feel a pressure behind your eyes as though they're trying to push themselves out of your skull. Your jaw aches from grinding your teeth, but you can't unclench it. You're not sure you could speak even if you wanted to, which you don't. Words are too hard. Breathing is hard. Everything is hard, except crying, which happens without your permission. You don't sleep. You close your eyes, but nothing happens. Time stretches into a blur of pain and sweat and nausea. You hallucinate, probably. You see things you know aren't there. People from your past. People you forgot. People who never existed. Sometimes you hear voices. Sometimes you feel like your own mind has stepped just slightly outside your skull, watching you with quiet contempt. You lose track of whether it's day or night. You don't care. There's no comfort to be found in either. No one helps. That part stings more than you thought it would. You're not in a hospital. You're not in a clinic. You're in a room with peeling paint and a cracked bowl of water, left on the floor like you're an injured dog someone's still deciding whether to put down. You thought maybe the attendants at the den would check on you. They don't. You thought maybe someone you smoked beside for months might ask where you've gone. They haven't. You're not missed. You're not mourned. You're just absent. Except by the dealer. He always knows. You're not sure how he finds you, but he does. Maybe you made the mistake of asking someone for help. Maybe he saw the flicker of desperation in your eyes the last time you passed him on the street. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe he just knows the timeline. He shows up like clockwork. Not when you're at your worst, but right after. Right when your body has broken enough to beg, but not enough to die. He doesn't push. He doesn't need to. He just waits, pipe in hand, product wrapped in oily paper, smile thin and knowing. You tell yourself you won't take it, that you've made it this far, that the worst is over. That's another hour, maybe another day, and you'll be through it. But your body doesn't believe you. It screams for the smoke. Your hands tremble, your breath shortens. You feel your resolve evaporate like sweat on hot skin. You reach out, slowly, shamefully, and the dealer doesn't gloat. He doesn't say a word. He just lights the lamp and passes the pipe like a priest offering communion, and you take it like a starving man takes spoiled bread. The relief is immediate and devastating. Your muscles relax, your vision sharpens, the nausea fades, your skin stops crawling. You exhale, not because you mean to, but because your body does it for you, like it's been holding its breath this entire time. And in that moment, you understand something new. You're not afraid of dying, you're afraid of feeling. And opium, more than anything else, makes sure you don't have to. You lie back on the mat, not caring how filthy it is, and close your eyes. This time, sleep comes. Not rest, not healing, just unconsciousness. You wake hours later, groggy, ashamed, but comfortable enough to pretend this didn't happen. You tell yourself you'll try again tomorrow. That next time, you'll be stronger. that this was just a lapse. You even believe it for a few minutes, but you don't try again. Because the truth is this: quitting isn't hard because of the pain. It's hard because of the silence that comes afterward. The silence where your thoughts return, your regrets crawl back, and the weight of everything you've done, or failed to do, settles into your chest. The pipe doesn't just kill the craving, it kills the need to explain yourself. Without it, you're just another ruined thing, trying to survive in a city built to forget you. So you keep smoking, not because it makes you feel good, but because the alternative is being awake. And you've had quite enough of that. There's a part of the den that most people pretend not to notice. It's not hidden exactly, just slightly removed, set off to one side behind a drooping curtain or in the farthest corner of the room where the lamp oil burns low. It doesn't have a name, not one anyone says out loud, but everyone knows what it is. It's where the sick go, the ones who can't sit up anymore, the ones who stopped asking for a pipe and started muttering to people who aren't there, the ones who haven't eaten in days but whose bodies still twitch when someone walks too close. The den doesn't throw them out. That would take effort. Instead, it simply isolates them, lets them slide into the shadows and waits for the inevitable. You tell yourself you'll never end up there, that you're different, that you still have some dignity, some strength, some shred of self left unspoiled. You hold on to that belief until the moment you can't stand without vomiting, until the joints in your fingers swell and your skin splits along your knuckles. Your reflection starts to frighten you, but not in the usual way. It frightens you because it looks like everyone else who's ended up on the dying floor. Grey skin, sunken eyes, lips crusted with blisters. It's not the face of someone living badly. It's the face of someone already leaving. When they move you, no one says anything. You don't remember walking there. You just wake up one evening, or maybe morning, and realise your mat is thinner, the air heavier, the company quieter. Around you, bodies lie crumpled in strange positions, too thin or too bloated, mouths open but silent. One man rocks slightly, back and forth, his eyes rolled up. A woman coughs a stream of blood onto her pillow and turns her face away, as if embarrassed. You try to speak to them once, but your words fall flat. They're not listening, or maybe they can't. You're not sure how long you stay there. Days blend together, or they don't. The light from the window doesn't reach this far anymore. Your body continues its collapse. Your legs swell with fluid. Your ankles vanish. The skin on your arms breaks open in patches, weeping clear liquid that smells faintly sweet. Flies gather around your eyes and mouth. Not in swarms, just a few, enough to remind you that you're no longer fully a person. You try to brush them away, but your arms won't lift reliably, so they stay. The sores come next. They start small, reddish and itchy. Then they burst and spread. Your fingernails begin to blacken at the edges. Your teeth loosen. You wonder which part of you will fall off first. The attendants still pass by with pipes and supplies, but they don't stop as often. You're not profitable anymore. What little silver you had is long gone, and they've seen this enough times to know how it ends. Occasionally, someone leaves a bowl of congee near your mat, more a gesture than an offering. You try to eat it. Sometimes you succeed. Sometimes you don't. You begin talking to people who aren't there, not because you're hallucinating, though you probably are, but because you're lonely. The others on the floor have mostly gone inward. Their faces are turned to the wall or to nothing. You whisper names you haven't spoken in years, tell stories from before the den, ask questions to no one. Sometimes you get answers. You try not to think about what that means. The line between dreaming and waking has long since dissolved. The pipe still comes, now and then, and you take it. You always take it, not because you want the high. At this point, there is no high, only absence. Some nights someone dies, it's hard to tell exactly when it happens. There are no outcries, no announcements. Just a sudden stillness that lasts a little too long. A body that doesn't shift when disturbed. A shape that doesn't breathe anymore. They're removed discreetly at dusk or dawn, depending on who's watching. Covered with a cloth, carried through the alley behind the den, and dumped somewhere no one will check. You don't ask where. You already know the answer. Your own body is failing in increments. One morning, you try to sit up, and your spine seizes. The pain is so sharp you black out. When you wake, someone's taken the blanket from your legs. You want to be angry, but you can't remember how. You want to cry, but the tears don't come. Your thoughts move sluggishly, like a tide pulling back for the last time. The world narrows to the space in front of your face. Dust, fabric, a single thread loose in the mat. That becomes your entire universe. People still come and go from the rest of the den. You hear them sometimes, laughter, footsteps, the pop of an opium ball sizzling on a lamp. For them, the dream is still alive, still warm and golden. They haven't arrived here yet, but they will. They always do. The den has 100 rooms and one destination. Some reach it faster, some crawl towards it over years. But everyone ends up in the same corner eventually, staring at the same ceiling, waiting for the same breath that won't come. You used to think death would frighten you, but by the time it gets close, it feels more like a favour, a final kindness from a system that has otherwise shown you none. You don't pray, you don't beg, you don't even regret it anymore. Regret requires energy, requires memory, requires belief that things could have gone differently. You no longer have access to those luxuries. You're just here, existing until you don't. And when that moment comes, whenever it does, no one will notice right away. The den will keep humming. The smoke will keep curling. Someone will walk past your mat without looking down. And that will be the end of it. Not a tragedy, not even a story. Just another body on the dying floor. Another name no one remembers. Another silence in a city that never stops making noise. By the time you notice the men profiting from your ruin, it's already too late for it to matter. You're lying in a corner of a den that no longer pretends to care if you're alive or dead. And still, the trade moves smoothly around you. No one hesitates, no one pauses, no one lowers their voice. You start to see it more clearly now. Not because your mind is sharp, it's not, but because there's nothing left to distract you. No money, no hope, no illusions, only silence and the people who benefit from it. They don't visit the dens unless it's for business. You've seen them once or twice. Clean shoes, pressed collars, moving through the shadows like inspectors or landlords or both. They don't touch the pipes. They don't breathe the air too deeply. They look at the smokers the way a butcher looks at a side of meat. Useful until it rots. Some are Chinese, born in the city, and fluent in the contradictions it takes to survive here. Others are British, sent from firms back home, or simply lingering after the last treaty like mould on a damp wall. A few are officials, dressed in uniforms that suggest legitimacy but smell faintly of bribes. The smugglers don't see themselves as criminals. They call themselves traders, intermediaries, logistics specialists. They move product, not poison. They frame it as commerce, a neutral word, a civilized word, something that sounds like it belongs in a ledger or a speech. They don't handle the drugs directly anymore, if they ever did. That's for the men in the boats, the runners in the alleys, the mules who carry bricks under their clothes and die when the wrapping bursts inside them. But the smugglers own the routes, and the middlemen own the safety nets. They make sure the shipments arrive. They grease the right palms. They vanish the right people. You've learned how the system works, not from books or lectures, but from watching it operate around your body, like a machine stripping a carcass. The poppies are grown far from here. The resin is processed, packed, stamped, and loaded onto ships or hidden in carts. Somewhere, a customs official looks the other way for the right price. Somewhere else, A warehouse clerk changes a line on a manifest. The opium arrives in Shanghai before you even realize it's coming. By the time it's in your pipe, it's passed through a dozen hands, each one cleaner than the last. They talk about efficiency, about margins, about logistics. You've overheard them in tea houses, in offices with open windows, during brief stops in the den when they assume no one's listening. They speak with the calm detachment of men who never have to touch what they sell. To them, addiction is an abstract, a necessary side effect, a market behaviour. You dying in a corner is not a tragedy. It's a forecast, a line on a chart that suggests the next shipment should be larger. The corruption is so routine, it doesn't even feel hidden. Local officials skim profits off the top, then pass new regulations that happen to benefit the people paying them. Police arrest the occasional low-level smuggler just to show they're doing something. Trials are held, fines are paid, nothing changes. The structure holds because it isn't just profitable, it's convenient. For the smugglers, for the middlemen, for anyone who benefits from a public too dazed to protest and too sick to resist. The people doing well in Shanghai, the ones with clean teeth and quiet homes, rarely ask where their comfort comes from. Or if they do, it's a rhetorical question, meant to be ignored. Some of them will admit it privately, that the system is cruel, that the trade is ugly, that the city is built on suffering. But they always follow it with a shrug, or a quote from scripture, or the phrase, "That's just how things are." You've come to hate that phrase more than anything else. You remember one man in particular, tall, well-dressed, with fingers too soft to have ever laboured. He came into the den to speak with the owner, exchanged some coins and a quiet nod. On his way out, he passed you. You don't think he saw you? Not really. His eyes drifted over you like you were furniture or a stain on the floor. You wanted to ask him something, anything, just to prove you were a person. But you didn't. You didn't have the strength, and he didn't need your voice. He already had your money. That's the most painful part. You were useful once, not valuable exactly, but usable. Now you're not even that. Your silver's gone, your clothes are rags, your breath smells like blood and ash. No one comes to see you anymore, not even the dealer. You're not a client, you're not a risk, you're not an investment, you're just residue, leftover damage, an echo of a transaction long completed. You used to wonder if the system would collapse under the weight of its own cruelty. Now you know better. It won't. It doesn't need to. There's always another addict, another shipment, another middleman. You won't be remembered. You won't even be mentioned. Just another name that never made it onto a ledger. Another body cleared to make space for someone still worth exploiting. It doesn't feel like the end. Not at first. There's no sudden drop, no flash of insight, no slow motion unraveling. You don't sit up one day and think, this is it. You don't get that kind of narrative closure. You just fade. A little more each time. One day, you wake up too weak to lift the pipe yourself. The next, you don't wake up at all until someone nudges your shoulder to see if you're still breathing. Eventually, they stop checking. You lie in your usual spot, the same cot you've occupied so long, it's conformed to the shape of your body. The mat is thinner than ever, and the blanket has been taken or lost. The air is heavy, thicker than it used to be, or maybe your lungs just don't work as well. You can still smell the smoke, still taste it, but it no longer comforts you. It doesn't take you anywhere now. It just quiets the parts of you that still make noise. Your body hurts in strange, quiet ways, not sharp pain. That would be too dramatic. It's more like fatigue with weight. Breathing takes effort. Blinking feels unnecessary. Your fingers no longer curl the way they used to. You feel heat in places you can't identify, and cold in places that should be warm. You don't know the last thing you ate. You don't care. Even thirst is abstract now. Your body doesn't ask for anything anymore. It just endures. People come and go. The den is as busy as ever. The lamp flickers, someone whispers in the next cot, then laughs, then falls silent. You hear the clink of a pipe being passed, the wet cough of someone too far gone to recover, the soft sound of a body shifting under layers of tattered cloth. The world around you continues in a muted hum. It doesn't slow for you. It doesn't wait. There is no ceremony, no final moment where the heavens part and your spirit lifts free. No sense of lifting out of your skin, no memory montage, no tearful goodbyes. You stop moving sometime after midnight, or maybe midday, no one's sure. You exhale and don't bother inhaling again. Not on purpose, not consciously. Your chest just doesn't rise again. That's all. No one screams, no one even pauses. The man beside you coughs into his sleeve. A girl on the far side of the room laughs at something no one else heard. The pipe passes over your body like a relay baton. Someone sits down on the edge of your cot without realizing, or maybe realizing, but not caring. You don't feel it. Your muscles have already stiffened. Your bowels release a little. That's how they know. A young attendant pulls the cloth up over your head, not out of respect, but to make the room look tidier. There's no announcement, no prayer, just a nod to the back room, where the others are kept until someone comes to take them away. You'll wait there too, slumped against the wall, with your eyes closed and your lips parted, like you've simply dozed off in the middle of something boring. And in a way, you have. There is no record. You didn't die in a hospital or at home. You weren't seen by a doctor. You didn't sign anything. You didn't leave instructions. Someone may guess your name, if they bother to write one down. It'll be misspelled. It'll be wrong. You weren't important enough for accuracy. You weren't important enough for paperwork. The body cart comes at dusk, covered of course, in case anyone still cares about appearances. It rolls down the alley with one cracked wheel and a trail of buzzing flies. Yours is not the only body on it. Two others are already there. One slips to the side and presses against you like old laundry. No one adjusts it. No one speaks. The man pulling the cart doesn't look back. You're dumped unceremoniously into whatever pit is being used this week. A trench on the edge of the city, a ditch behind a warehouse, a nameless patch of dirt where someone once promised to build a factory. No marker, no ceremony, no one to say you mattered. Just a thin layer of earth and the promise that no one will ask questions. The den doesn't change. That's the most sobering part. The moment you vanish, someone else takes your place. Another body, another pipe, another slow descent. The mat is reused, the blanket replaced. Your cot doesn't get washed. It doesn't need to. The next person won't care. They'll be too far gone, too hungry for silence, too tired of caring. Just like you. Your absence doesn't echo. There's no gap in the room, no ache in the walls, no hush that falls when someone says your name. Because no one does. The den is not a place of memories. It's a place of forgetting. That's what it sells after all. And now you've simply joined the inventory. One more thing that got used up, and somewhere, far from here, someone continues to profit. The crates still arrive, the pipes are still lit, the ledgers are still balanced. You were not a tragedy. You were not a warning. You were part of the cost of doing business. And now you're gone, which means the system works. No one remembers you. No one mourns. No one stops. And that, in the end, is how it happens. Not with cruelty, not with sympathy, just with indifference. A shrug from the city that swallowed you whole. A puff of smoke that doesn't even rise. You're not the first to die like this. Not even close. You're not even the first today. There's always someone ahead of you. Always someone behind. The dens have seen more deaths than hospitals, more disappearances than police records, more prayers, if you can call them that, than temples. And now you're part of that accumulation. Not history, not legacy, just residue, something left behind when the body finally gives up. But death doesn't cleanly sever you from the den. Not entirely. The walls remember. Not through magic or mysticism, though there's plenty of that if you listen long enough, but through saturation. The air holds the weight of every collapsed lung, every last breath, every wasted heartbeat. You can still feel it somehow, not as a presence exactly, but as an echo. You aren't alone. Not in any way that matters. There are sounds no one acknowledges. A soft creak in an empty bunk. The scratch of something moving just beyond the reach of the lamp. Laughter, low and broken, from a corner that hasn't been occupied in weeks. Sometimes someone murmurs a name, not their own, and insists they weren't talking to anyone. You hear footsteps when no one is walking. You feel watched even when the room is still. It's easy to call it delusion, easier to blame the drug. But that doesn't explain why everyone hears it eventually, even the sober ones, especially the sober ones. The living don't ask questions. Most of them wouldn't remember how. They keep their eyes on the pipe, their breath shallow, their thoughts pulled inward like curtains against a storm. But they flinch. You've seen it. A sudden jerk of the shoulders, a turned head, a glance at nothing, followed by a deeper inhale. They know something else is there. They just choose not to name it. Naming things gives them shape, and nothing here deserves to be shaped. Some say the dens are haunted, that the spirits of the addicts linger, not out of vengeance, but out of habit. They've forgotten how to leave. The body dies, but the craving doesn't. It drifts, it clings, it waits. You hear stories, quietly exchanged between fixations, about shadows that sit at the end of your mat, about a man who smokes all night and finds the pipe cold in the morning, untouched, unmoved, but still somehow empty, about voices whispering not threats, but invitations. Just one more, and you'll be safe. Even the attendants have their rituals. You've seen them knock on door frames that no longer hold doors. You've seen them mutter phrases before entering the back rooms, avert their eyes when stepping over an unused cot. Superstition is too polite a word for it. This is survival. They've watched too many die to believe in clean endings. They know the dead don't leave when you tell them to. They leave when they're finished. And some of them are never finished. Sometimes the ghosts aren't even dead. That's the cruelest part. A man can be so far gone that his body keeps breathing while everything else has already slipped out. He stares unblinking through the air like he's watching something no one else can see. He doesn't speak. He barely eats. He barely smokes, but he won't leave either. He just exists, quiet, hollow, and everyone treats him like furniture. But some nights, when the lamp burns low and the room goes still, he laughs, softly, like someone just told him something dark and true. You don't know what that means. No one does. You start to wonder what you've become. Not who you were. That question stopped mattering long ago. But what remains of you now? Maybe you're one of the things brushing past the curtains. Maybe you're the breath on someone's neck that makes them shiver and pull the blanket tighter. Maybe you linger beside the pipe, not out of malice, but out of memory. You didn't want to leave, not really. You just wanted the silence to last a little longer. It's not hell. Hell would require intention, punishment. This is something quieter, emptier, like being trapped in the moments just after a bad dream, when nothing's wrong but everything feels off. No fire, no devils, just the slow, endless repetition of what's already happened. And if you stay long enough, even that begins to lose shape. You forget you were ever alive at all. You're just part of the room now. The dust, the cold patch on the floor, the sound that doesn't match the light. And yet, the den continues. People still come, still lie down, still light the pipe. They ignore the creaks and the whispers, or they mistake them for the building settling, for rats, for wind. They tell themselves ghosts aren't real, that the things they hear in the quiet are just tricks of the high. They'll keep telling themselves that until they hear your voice, or someone else's, or their own, because the dens don't forget, the walls don't forget. And the dead? Sometimes the dead don't know they're dead. They just keep smoking, waiting for the silence to return, curling in the corners of the room, like the smoke they once exhaled. Maybe that's you now. Not gone, not whole, just part of the haze. One more ghost in a place that never stops collecting them. You may be gone, but the trade isn't. It never was about you, and it never needed you specifically. There were others before you, and there are others now, curling into the same haze, whispering the same lies, chasing the same numbness. You weren't unique. You weren't even unusual. You were part of a pattern so well worn, it no longer looks like a tragedy. It just looks like business. Opium doesn't stop. It adapts. When ports close, it moves inland. When governments ban it, it finds new routes. When one method of consumption starts killing too fast or too visibly, another emerges. A different pipe, a finer powder, a slower death. The product changes shape, packaging, origin, name, but the function remains exactly the same. It silences, it softens, it sells. That's the part that matters. Empires fall, armies withdraw, treaties expire, but the trade persists, like mold in the cracks of civilization. You could bomb a city to the ground, and by the time the rubble cools, someone would already be laying the first shipment on a new route. Opium doesn't care who's in charge. It doesn't care if the flag changes or if the map gets redrawn. All it needs is a supplier, a buyer, and someone desperate enough to bridge the distance in between. In Shanghai, the names on the shipping manifests shifted over the decades, but the cargo stayed the same. The British were replaced by other colonial hands, who were in turn replaced by local syndicates, then shadowy partnerships that blurred the line between government, business, and criminal enterprise. Each claimed to be cleaning up the city. Each promised to end the scourge. But none of them turned down the profits. The routes were too established, the demand too reliable. Eventually, the drug changed. Morphine, heroin, synthetics, pills with names that sounded less dangerous, more medicinal. Chemists refined what farmers once bled from flower bulbs. Addicts stopped using lamps and pipes and started using needles and tablets. But nothing really changed. The glow became a buzz. The ritual became convenience. The decay stayed the same. The hunger stayed the same. You could take the dens out of the city, but the need would just find a new address. Your death wasn't a warning. It was a byproduct, a cost absorbed by the supply chain. You might have believed in your worst moments that you were the end point, the final consumer in a long chain of transactions. But you weren't the end. You were a link. You validated the system by dying predictably, in the right place, at the right speed. Your last breath was the quiet confirmation that the system still worked. And still, somewhere, someone is counting the money. Not with malice, not even with joy, just with detachment. A warehouse in another city, a meeting in a quiet office, a signature on a form that pushes the next shipment forward. Your ghost might linger in the den, but the ledger has already moved on. Your overdose is yesterday's margin adjustments. The pipe is cleaned, the mat is filled. There's nothing left to account for. Governments eventually turn their attention elsewhere. They always do. A new war, a new plague, a new election. Opium and its modern children fade from the headlines. Occasionally, there's a scandal, a shipment intercepted, a factory raided, a powerful man disgraced, but it never lasts. The system's too diffuse now, too flexible. You can't put it on trial because it's everywhere and nowhere at once. It's not a single villain, it's a network, a habit, a need that keeps outpacing shame. People still say it started in Shanghai, that the modern trade was born in the ports, and counting houses, and dens that turned men like you into currency. But that's too simple. The trade didn't start there. It just grew teeth there. It became proud, organised, global. What began as a seed in one empire is now a forest in all of them. No one country owns the problem. No one culture is exempt from it. The pipe has many descendants now. Syringes, patches, capsules, powders, and the hunger has outlived every empire that once thought it could control it. There are campaigns, of course, posters and slogans and confiscations, pamphlets printed by clean-handed people who speak of rehabilitation, of justice, of second chances. They mean well, most of them, but they're too late, always too late, because addiction doesn't wait for permission and the trade doesn't wait for laws. For every factory that shuts down, another opens in a country where labour is cheaper and regulations are easier to bend. For every dealer arrested, 2 more step in to fill the demand. The cycle doesn't break, it just changes costumes. And through it all, the craving remains. That deep, crawling emptiness that some people are born with and others acquire through slow corrosion. The thing that made you reach for the pipe in the first place. Loneliness, pain, boredom, grief, some sadness you couldn't name. It didn't die with you. It just found another mouth, another pair of hands, another life willing to trade everything for a little silence. So the trade goes on, not because it's strong, but because it feeds on weakness. Not because it's clever, but because it only needs you to falter. And someone always does. A man with a broken back. A girl with no way out. A child who doesn't know what the smoke means. The machine waits patiently, and the product never spoils. You were never the main character. Not in your story. Not in anyone else's. Not in this city, or this empire, or the long choking tale of opium and profit. You were background, a blur, a figure slouched in the corner, while more powerful men drew borders and moved cargo and told themselves they were doing the work of civilization. You were not consulted. You were not considered. You were absorbed, used, discarded, and forgotten. Not out of cruelty, but out of complete indifference. There was never a version of this where you got out. Not really. The moment you stepped into Shanghai with your pockets half full and your illusions intact, the outcome was already printed in the margins of someone else's balance sheet. The pipe was waiting. The den was open. The space where you would one day die was already worn smooth from the bodies that came before you. Survival was never on offer. Not to people like you. What was offered was the illusion of choice, a parade of doors all leading to the same room. You told yourself you could handle it, that you were stronger than the others, that you were smarter, more disciplined, more aware of the risks. You thought you could dip a toe in without being pulled under, that you'd get out when you were ready, that the pipe was a tool, a crutch, a temporary solution to a temporary problem. That lie was not unique to you. It was the first lie handed out with the first dose. And you believed it exactly as long as they needed you to. You were a consumer, yes, but not of luxury or story or experience. You were a consumer of silence, of numbness, of a product that sells not euphoria, but erasure. You bought the ability to vanish from yourself. And when your body failed, when your usefulness ended, when there was nothing left to extract, you vanished in a more permanent way. The city did not pause. The system did not weep. The pipe passed hands. The mat was repurposed. You were replaced without anyone needing to ask your name. The history books will not mention you, not even in passing. They will talk about treaties and tariffs and trade wars. They will mention ports and prices and prime ministers. They will analyse the global impact of the opium trade, how it shaped economies, how it redrew maps, but they will not talk about the slow decay of your limbs, or the way your fingers twitched in your sleep, or the dreams that stopped coming. They will not record how many times you tried to stop, or how, in the end, you didn't even remember why you should. The architects of the system never thought of you as human. Not exactly. You were a unit of labour when sober, a unit of consumption when high, and a unit of waste when dead. That's the entire arc. A neat, unremarkable process. You might as well have been a crate of bricks. You cost money to keep alive. You made money when you bought. You disappeared when you didn't. That's the part they perfected, the seamless transition from value to vacancy, without any need for cleanup. Even your collapse was impersonal. No one watched it like a tragedy. No one followed your decline with suspense or sorrow. You weren't a warning. You weren't a lesson. You were just one more in a crowd of half-numbed ghosts slumping toward the same end. The den didn't mourn you. The city didn't record you. The world didn't even slow down. You passed like a shadow in smoke, fast, unnoticed, and immediately replaced by another. If you're remembered at all, it's by accident. A shrug from an old attendant. A guess from someone who thinks they might have known you. A momentary pause when a new smoker asks, "Wasn't someone else here?" And no one answers. But even those traces fade. The memory of you is as thin as the walls you died beside, cracked, stained, long, overdue for demolition. You weren't a villain. You weren't a hero. You weren't even a cautionary tale. You were a side effect, an acceptable loss, a predictable byproduct of a machine that requires ruin to stay in motion. That doesn't make your suffering less real. It just makes it less relevant. You lived in the margins, and now that you're gone, the page reads the same. The grand narrative continues without you. Empires will rise and fall again. New drugs will flood new cities. New bodies will collapse under new banners. But the shape of the story will stay the same. Hunger, profit, silence. And within that rhythm, there will always be someone like you. Not you exactly. You're gone, but someone enough like you that it won't matter. The system doesn't require individuals. It just needs statistics. You may have wanted to believe you were special, that your life had meaning beyond the smoke and the silence. And maybe, in some forgotten corner of a memory, you did, for a little while. But the city did not agree. The empire did not agree. And the pipe, most of all, never cared. So no, you were never the main character. You were a placeholder, a whisper in someone else's ledger, a name no one wrote down. And now that you're gone, the story continues exactly as it did before, uninterrupted, unimpressed, and already preparing the next scene. That brings us to the end of tonight's long descent, not into chaos, but into something slower, quieter, and far more profitable. If you're still awake, thank you for drifting with me through the smoke-filled corners of a system that didn't need swords to kill, just contracts, silence, and the willingness to look away. If you'd like early access to more softly spoken ruins from history's forgotten margins, along with perks like ad-free audio of these episodes, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about when you think you would have stopped fighting. The first pipe, the last coin, or somewhere in between. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review is the best way to help others find their way to these videos. Sleep well,